What's up, everybody? So today I'd like to talk about a term or an acronym, HDR. HDR photography. What is it? The reason why I'd like to talk about what it is and what it isn't is because I saw something today. Somebody posted up pretty much a statement similar to, hey, I was going through some old landscape pictures I took, and they seemed kind of flat. So I turned them into HDR, and I'm afraid to post them here because I know a lot of people don't like HDR photography. Why is that? Well, right away, I knew that the term she was talking about was overprocessed, not HDR. So I figured we could have a discussion today and talk about what HDR is and what it isn't, and why we use it. So the first thing I want to show you is what people think HDR photography is. So let's go there. This is what people think HDR photography is. These images are just processed, and in my opinion, a lot of them are over-processed. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about where it came from. Well, what we used to call it was bracketing or exposure compensation. And let's talk about why. So here you go. This, I tried to point at it like you're going to see me pointing. This right here is where the camera says you're going to be exposed properly for whatever metering you're using and what you're focusing on specifically. This is where the camera says the photo will be processed correctly. You can go up and you're going to overexpose, and you can go down and you're going to underexpose. So what that means is I can just move it down here if I want and take one photo that is underexposed. I can also control that in my SLR by just changing how long my shutter is open or how long it isn't open, and my ISO and all sorts of things I can change. Or I can just go to this on my menu and just scroll it over and say that's where I want to take the picture. Kind of a quicker way to change settings, to change the exposure of your photograph without having to go through and change, say, 2 to 3 different settings to get that same exposure. It's kind of like a shortcut. So why would I want to do that? We'll just talk about why I'd want to do that, but what started this? This is what started this, okay? This photograph right here, these are 3 separate photographs, and I kept moving my hand again. 1, 2, and 3, okay? So this photo right here is probably where we would be in this middle right here, okay? And then the same and the same as in the previous photo, correct? But I can merge these 3 photos together in post-processing. I can take this part down, so these bricks right here, from this photo, and from this photo I can take the building and all of this, and from this photo I can take just the sky. And I will have 3 separate exposures for 3 separate areas of the photo to give me an overall of what I want to see. Because if I just went with this one, well, maybe this is too dark for me. And maybe I don't have the dynamic range that I want in the sky like I'm getting over here. This isn't the best series of photos, but it was quick. I found it right away. So why would I want to do that? Well, to get the proper exposure for each. Our eyes aren't just exposing for the one thing we're looking at. When we move, I mean, our eyes are doing it super fast. the camera can't do that. And when the camera captures that still image, when our eyes go around the still image, we're going to see what the camera captured at that one spot, but with everything else maybe not exposed the way our eyes would see it if we were to roll around in that area where the photo was taken. As soon as we lower our eyes, they're going to open up a little bit more to bring up, to get rid of the shadows and make it brighter. When we look up at the sky, it's going to darken it a little bit. Whereas with a photo, it doesn't do that. So we can merge them all together. So how do we do that? So in my camera, just turn it on, right? And I will go to that area. I don't know how well this is going to be in focus. Okay, so that's right there, right? But I'm going to bring it out. Let's just bring it out to there, okay? We'll hit set. We'll back out of that. Now with this camera, I'm going to have to hit the shutter button 3 times. Whereas with some newer bodies, you just hit the shutter button once, and it'll actually click off the shutter 3 times to get the 3 separate pictures. So let's see what we get here. Okay. So if we hit the play button, and if you can see, this photo is overexposed. This photo is underexposed, and this photo is exposed properly. So maybe I want to use this bottom part here, and I want to use the background here, and I want to use the can here. So how that worked is exactly how you saw it. It took 3 separate photos at the 3 different exposures, and it's going to give me 3 different photos out of this camera. And then I am going to have to use a program like Photoshop or something else to merge those photos together to create one photo. That's exposure compensation. That's really bracketing. Exposure compensation is when you just move it and you take the one photo. So that's what bracketing is, okay? What HDR is when the camera will take the 3 different photos, but it only gives me that end result. It uses the parts that it thinks you want and merges them together and gives you the one photo. My iPhone does that. If I put it in HDR, that's why you got to hold it still, it's going to take 3 separate photos, and then it's going to merge them together. And it's only going to give me one photo. I can set it up to give me the HDR photo and then the regular photo, so that would be this middle photo out of the 3 is what it can give me. Or I can just have it set up to just give me the HDR, which will blend all 3 of these together. That's what HDR is. So when somebody asks me, what do you think of HDR photography? I say, I think it's great. I can get my sky and the mountain and this fence that's right next to me all exposed at different levels and get them all together to look great in a photo. That's what HDR is. Not this. Do you think that with this photo that he had to take 3 different exposures and put them together and then overprocess the crap out of it? I don't think so. I think he just overprocessed it. Now, I say crap, and you can be mad at me for using that term. I just don't find these enjoyable to look at. But I don't find 4 Campbell's soup cans on one print that look a little bit different from each other. I don't find that nice to look at either. So maybe I don't know what art is. But it's my opinion. We all have our own opinions. We're all entitled to them. And as a photographer, I need to know how to do this, because if somebody wants this, I'm going to give it to them. But it's just not something that I like. I especially don't like that when you Google HDR photography, that's what you get, because these aren't HDR photos. These are just overprocessed. So bracketing, I can bring up so many more pictures about bracketing. You know, again, that's using white balance as bracketing. Um, and then here's a better image of what I was trying to show you with that bracketing, right? Now here is an HDR photo. It's not overprocessed. It's just down here and up here. So probably the middle is where it was actually exposed, where you would have exposed. And then they brought this up or down, and they brought this down or up. I'm assuming because it's shadows, they brought this up and they brought this down. Okay? That is an HDR photo. Now the cool thing is, with Lightroom and Photoshop, if you're shooting in RAW, you sometimes don't even have to take the full 3 pictures, depending upon how different those shadows or those exposures are. You can just change the exposure of just a part of your one photo and make it HDR. So going back to what the person posted earlier, maybe that's exactly what they did do, and they didn't overprocess, and I would love to see those photos because I think that's great. You know, if you bump up the brightness of the sky, or maybe you toned it down, you know, if you've ever taken photos of a person and there's a bright sky behind them, maybe it's got some nice white clouds on a blue background. If you're exposing for the person, that sky is going to be blown out and you're not even going to see the clouds. So that's when, and probably trying to do it in Lightroom just with the one photo, it's not going to work. But if you're able to take the 3 different exposures, so you expose for the sky, you expose for the person, you expose for the background, right wherever they're standing, you'll be able to see the beautiful blue sky with the white clouds, and then the person perfectly exposed, and then their background perfectly exposed. That's what it's for. So I think it's a great tool. I just think it's a term that people are confusing with just processing a photo for that high dynamic range, which you get this sometimes when it's overdone. There's probably a couple tasteful ones in here. This one doesn't look so bad. See if I can find another one that probably doesn't look so bad, in my opinion. Like, I mean, look at this. It's just not my thing, you know. This one's not so bad. That's pretty neat, right? Probably a long exposure as well. But you see the point I'm trying to make. HDR is high dynamic range, and it's giving you the ability to see each part of a photograph at the proper exposure, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that just with a single picture, because it's only going to expose and meter for what you're telling it to, and everything else will just be, you know, depending on your spot metering, depending upon lots of things, will determine how exposed everything else is. So my thoughts on the subject, I think that even if you just consider this a hobby, you know, you're just taking photos for yourself, knowing the proper terms and what they actually mean could probably help you out. So I hope this helps some people that didn't really understand the concept. Even if assholes like me say that some of these overprocessed pictures aren't that good, to say it in a nicer way, who cares? Why do you care what I think? Who am I? If you like your photos, post them up. Maybe a lot of other people will like them too, because there wouldn't be this many on here if it wasn't popular and people didn't like it. So maybe I have no idea what I'm talking about. That's it. Grab your gear and get out there. Peace.